As India's three-day dialogue at Charcha 2025 draws to a close, this plenary reflects on a central question. What will it take to realize the promise of a Viksit Bharat by 2047? An India that is not only prosperous, but also inclusive, resilient, and inclusive, and equitable. Did I say inclusive twice? Yeah, we need it. India's growth narrative is compelling. Now the world's fourth largest economy, with a thriving digital infrastructure, expanding manufacturing base, and deepening entrepreneurial ecosystem. Yet the path to becoming a developed nation demands not only linear progress, but non-linear breakthroughs across policy, philanthropy, innovation, and collective imagination. Philanthropy in India is entering a defining decade. It is evolving from charitable giving to catalytic capital, de-risking innovation, enabling system reform, and incubating ideas that markets and governments may not immediately back. At the same time, state capability and private enterprise are expanding their roles as co-creators in solving structural challenges of jobs, education, inclusion, and sustainability. By 2047, India's ambition is to eradicate poverty, formalize its economy, achieve universal skilling, and ensure that growth translates into dignity for every citizen. However, the pathways to get there are not singular. They lie in blended ecosystems where philanthropic vision accelerates state delivery, where innovation complements regulation, and where community leadership shapes the development agenda from the ground up. This closing plenary will synthesize insights from 3 days of thematic conversations that we've had on jobs, on inclusion, on women in the loop, on digital transformation, rural regeneration, and formalization, which are necessary to start what's next for India's collective mission for Viksit Bharat. May I please now call upon our distinguished guests for the plenary. Shri Amarjit Sinha ji, IAS, former Secretary, Senior Fellow, Department of Rural Development, Government of India, former advisor to the Prime Minister of India, Center for Social and Economic Progress. Next up, we have Neelam Dhawanji, Independent Director, HUL, ICICI Bank. Shri Mukmeet Singh Bhatia, IAS, former Secretary, Minister of Minority Affairs, Government of India. Shri Minik Gogri, Sustainability Investor, Spectrum Impact, Family Office of Aarti Industries. This session is moderated by Atul Satija, founder and CEO, the Nudge Institute. As Atul usually likes it, we will have a round of Q&A at the end of the session. There would just be a mic passed through and we will take questions from there. Thank you. Thank you so much. Over to you, Atul.
Thank you. So this is the last session of this 3-day Charcha, and we are standing between you starting your Friday evening or taking your flights back, etc. We have about 50 minutes, and like Gitanjali said, we'll keep some room for questions as well. But we hope we make this last 1 hour very useful for you, and I'm sure we will, because we have a very, very illustrious group of panelists here with us. So we're going to discuss a very, very important topic, which is to synthesize what we have discussed over the last 3 days and share a little bit of the thinking of how the group thinks about the path to a developed India and what kind of developed India should we be imagining, especially in this room that cares about not just the growth, but inclusive growth as well. So with that, I'll start with actually an opening question to all 4 of you, which is, and there was a debate on this in the opening session as well, that India has been, like Gandhiji said, India lives in its villages. 6 lakh then, now around 7 lakh villages or so. And a lot of our population is dependent on agri today, almost half of it. Uh, we switched from agri to services, and a lot of people moved to services economy. We've seen huge amount of growth in that as well, and we missed the manufacturing bus. When you imagine going forward, what kind of primary, secondary, tertiary mix that you see in India's path to being developed? Will we see manufacturing being cracked? Will we see agri productivity increase so more people can actually make meaningful livelihoods through that? Or do you see that we'll continue to rely more than other countries have been in their journey to be developed on services? So I'll start with that. Why don't we start with you, Amarjiji, and we'll come back from that.
Thanks, Atul. I think we live in such changing times that it is very difficult to say with emphasis that this is what is going to happen. But nonetheless, if a nation has a vision for a developed India, clearly it has to fire on all engines. It cannot just be one sector and not the other. But at the core of the question that you ask, it is to do with human capability. We have a large youth bulge, which we expect to become our demographic dividend. What shape we give it will determine what sectors we will be in. And clearly that is a lesson from across the world. No nation in the world has become developed without ensuring a certain quality of the human capital where it matters most. The East Asian countries were a success of exactly that. In changing times when technology is changing, many things are changing, global markets are changing, protectionism is coming again. What route, what form it takes, difficult to predict. But if you are prepared for that change with human capital of the kind that you need, even agriculture will need better human capital. So from that perspective, irrespective of which sectors attract how many, the fundamental issue to my mind, and something which some economists have examined this, some of you may have read Professor Ashoka Modi's very depressing book, otherwise, India is broken and hard to fix. But we need to read that only for this perspective. Primary education, primary health, nutrition, clean cities, less pollution, better legal system. He points out employment, quality of employment. These are the things where we should have done better. So my answer to your question would be, if we do better in these sectors, and to do that you need collaborative governance, you need a human capital thrust, then alone we'll be able to determine which way, which sector attracts how many, and where do we fit in the larger global value chains that we create. Thank you.
Essentially what I'm hearing you say is that you have opportunities across all three, but we essentially have to invest in the human capital of the country to get there. Merit?
So I come from a manufacturing background, so I'll be biased that we need more manufacturing for sure. But let me just sort of take this question and open it up a bit. I think what we say is agriculture also will sort of change in the future a bit. And the reason that I say that what is happening because of the whole broader climate issues and the decentralization of energy itself, whether it's from agri-bio waste or to solar, suddenly your agriculture fields can also, whether it's energy crops, the earlier definition now it will have more opportunity to generate different forms of capital on the ground, and that will create business models which are sort of a unique business model. So one thing is, like, if you look at the coal usage, which is, say, just for sake of discussion, say a 1 lakh crore worth of coal is imported into India from various sources. Now imagine if that is coming from agri-bio waste, that's a huge transfer of wealth from a few select global companies that is going to happen to the farmers in that way. So I think agriculture in that sense will become more productive and more sort of cash rich. But as a country, what we will need to really strive for is manufacturing really has to step forward. In 2014, our aim was by 2022 to be 25% of the GDP to be manufacturing. And the reason for manufacturing, I think it's important to note, is the geopolitics of the world is also critical. Like the ability for China to hold the bargaining chips in a lot of these trade negotiations is because of the strength of manufacturing of rare earth. Where is our bargaining chip? Like that's the reality. We should always look at the macro scenario. So I think the question is not only manufacturing, but we have to be strategic in some of those aspects and be able to get some of those bargaining chips in the next few years. Otherwise, we will be at the leeway of the global biggies, and I think that's a thing we want to definitely avoid. So the service sector, which has obviously taken a lot of strength, I think that will continue to grow, but maybe not at the pace as it was earlier because of the big trends that we were just discussing around AI and things around that. So manufacturing should be the highest grower. I think agriculture will transform itself a bit, become more productive, more mechanized, and I think services will still be important, but the growth will not be maybe as high. That's my prediction, which I will be proven wrong in the next couple of years. So.
So Atul, I'll put on a more of a, since I have a exposure to the labor sector. So for me, the more important question is not so much what the numbers will look like in terms of these three sectors, but the nature of the work that is happening. And, you know, as recent as day before yesterday, there was this India Skills report that came out by CII. And one of the key numbers that is emerging is that, for instance, the gig and platform workers who are currently about 10 to 12 million will go up to almost 35 to 40 million in the next 5 years. So for me, putting on the labor hat, I think the nature of work, how is it changing? I think for me, that's a critical question. What are the social security systems we're going to have? What is the extent of informalization that's going to happen? For instance, even within government, we noticed that earlier when we joined service, we used to have class 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 has been eliminated. Now all those are contractual employees. Increasingly, we are finding that in the factories, a lot of contractual labor is coming in. So the whole issue of social security systems, gig and platform workers. So I would actually look deeper, just go beyond those numbers and look at the nature of work and the social security systems that need to be put in place for that change. My focus would be on that also.
Anilam, you have worked in both manufacturing and services in your long career. What is your perspective?
So when I think about Viksit Bharat and I think of 2047, and I also think of Atmanirbhar, because if we are going to be dependent on overseas for everything, for foreign companies and foreign countries, perhaps the growth we'll see, the success we'll see will be short-lived. Living example is the tariff situation, which has killed a lot of our businesses, and also what China has done to us by restricting selling things to us. So it's very important for Viksit Bharat to be stable and long term. We need to be Atmanirbhar. We cannot be dependent on others. That's one. Two, I agree with Amarjit. It cannot be that one sector is lagging behind. It is not about agriculture or manufacturing or services. All of them have to grow and provide the kind of jobs which people can do. The self-respect has to come in every job we do. That मैं भारती हूँ, मैं ये काम करती हूँ या मैं ये काम करता हूँ, that pride has to come. And until that pride comes, we'll do a shoddy quality work in wherever we are. We do manufacturing, which is not up to the world standards. We do agriculture, which is not up to world standards. And I can tell you, we have capabilities in services, but we are not doing it to the world standard. That pride in what I do in this country, how I keep it, what I do here, has to come in each and every individual. So it's the building of the, I would say the building of the thinking that I have to be proud of what I do. And that is a behavior change which is so critical for our success in my thinking.
I think what I'm hearing probably common from all of you is that none of us know through the crystal ball gazing that it's going to be one sector over the other, but what will the labor do? What will the an average median Indian do is a function of how we create jobs for everyone across all sectors, and how do we make sure there are social protection systems and things like that that you were alluding to. I think one of the really fascinating things that India has done in the last 10, 15, 20 years is that we have almost solved the access till the last mile. whether it's through physical connectivity, roads. It may not be to every last village, but it is almost to the last village everywhere. We have solved for digital connectivity. Almost everybody can afford a phone. Most of them are able to afford data on top of it as well. Digital connectivity is almost solved for. I think financial connectivity is also solved for with not just bank accounts being there, but having some money, UPI, etc., etc. It's really fascinating story. But I think the least understood is the social connectivity. Thanks to the SHG movement that you have been a part of, 100 million women roughly in SHGs, all connected through a single social fabric, probably the largest social fabric of its kind globally. What does this access to the last mile in India enable? And what is the role that markets will play there? A lot of that historically has been governments accessing the last mile and providing them support. And we still see the support coming in many different forms. The Bihar election results are out. A lot of social protection promises were made by everyone, and that played a huge role in the outcome as well. What is the role that you see going forward with this infrastructure build out that we have seen at the last mile, which is what we are discussing in terms of people looking for jobs, better life, better outcomes for their lives, etc. So let me start with you, Amarjit sir.
Thanks, Atul. See, technology is always only a means. It's not an end in itself. That's a point I make in all humility. We often assume that it's an end, and that's where we make a mistake. You talked about the digital public infrastructure and where it can take. Yes, it can. But for doing digital public infrastructure, you needed that last mile facilitation. In this case, thanks to the 100 million women in rural India, part of the women's collectives, today more than 60% gram panchayats have a local semi-literate woman as a banking correspondent. I still recall the first time when I had gone with that proposal to the finance ministry, nobody was willing to look at the proposal in 2016. How can a semi-literate woman be a banking correspondent? We have a commercial model, but that commercial model was not taking off in remote areas where they needed most. So if you did not facilitate the banking correspondent from the local community, the women's collective, this would not have gone the manner in which it has gone. I can narrate thousands of such incidents across these sectors. Unfortunately, on the last mile facilitation and collaborative governance, we need to do much more in urban areas. You might find this very surprising. But a ward is a very large unit. You can't have communitization at a ward level. In a large municipal corporation, a ward is 30,000 to 3 lakh people. You can't have community action there. So what we need to work towards, and the constitution doesn't come in the way, I've been saying this for a very long time, you need elected leadership even at the Basti level. You need a stake of the local community for urban governance in a more direct way. For a whole lot of not only social development, even infrastructure. Sometimes we start off on a project without the deliberation at the local level. The detailed project report is prepared without local consultation, for example, say for a metro rail. Then what happens after that? Local communities say, we don't want this alignment, we want a different alignment. And the project goes for another 3 years, because the whole thing has to be done again. So I think last mile facilitation and collaborative action is a necessity. It's not a choice. Across the world, whichever country you look at, unless you worked in a deliberative manner at that level, you did not secure the kinds of benefits that you want. We have done many sectors very well. But as a nation, if you were to ask me on this question particularly, technology is a great enabler. Women's collectives, the 100 million women in rural India, is a great way to move forward with that social capital. But that social capital and technology will only be able to deliver if we adopt the collaborative, and collaborative governance is not only about consultation. It is about actually having a say in decision making. So and even if you look at our own country, decentralization, for example, the provinces which have decentralized more, one, their health and sanitation indicators are better. Two, their per capita consumption expenditures are higher. Three, their multidimensional poverty is lower. Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Himachal Pradesh, Goa. Why do these figure there? They figure there simply because Sikkim, the decentralization, if you've pushed it very hard, you're likely to get the benefits at the level of local outcomes.
So what kind of governance changes do we need to get to that level of maturity? And I'd love to hear your thoughts, and Mukmeet, come to you on this as well.
No, clearly, time has come to take collaborative governance much more seriously. We have been doing it in many programs, but not doing it across the board. I think the time for silos is gone. We need to create that platform, horizontal platform for everybody to engage with, private sector, government, enterprise, whichever sector. Unless and until we are able to build on these decentralized platforms, and decentralization is not simply about calling a few people for a meeting. It's about listening and also giving them that respect of their views being taken seriously, and they're also part of the team. We need to create these platforms for better urban living. Clearly, that is a constraint. I mean, whether we like it or not, half the country will be urban. Are we prepared for the workmen who come to the cities? No. To do that, we need a more deliberative, local, collaborative governance for which institutionally, decentralization across programs, breaking down of vertical silos, I think these have necessarily to be attempted on a large scale, along with, of course, the human capital issue that I flagged, the 14 to 21 age. Currently, I am engaged in the CSEP in a public report on secondary education where we are looking at the 14 to 21 across 10 states. What are their human capital aspirations and what are they actually getting? To the other study on public report on collaborative governance, we are looking at this last mile facilitation across sectors. And what we find, if we are able to address these issues significantly, the future is ours. But we will need to do this at some point of time on scale across programs. Thanks.
Mukmeet, what do you have to say to that? The fact that India will be half urban, obviously we are formalizing, urbanizing
Correct.
at a very, very rapid pace. But if half of the country is living in cities, we already have the cities we have, and half of us will agree that there is more to be done to improve the quality of life for everyone in these cities. But are we ready for that? And what kind of systems do we need to make sure that not just the people in the room, but the last person in an urban city gets basic quality of life?
Correct. I'll just take off from where Amarjeet sir has said. In fact, what struck me in the last 2.5 days, there was a lot of talk of community. There was a lot of talk of government at the state and central level. There was a lot of talk of philanthropy and CSR. But I found one thing which was missing is, political ownership and leadership is important. But that doesn't just mean at the central and at the state level. What struck me, sir, in these last 2.5 days, because I've been here that there was no talk about our political leadership, our decentralized leadership at the field level. And I'm talking about the panchayats and the blocks. So I think there is a need, of course, working with the community is great, but at some point we also need to acknowledge the fact that there is a formal system in place and we need to get them onto these community efforts. I'm sure so the Bihar effort would attest to that there is a synergy between what is already existing in the government structures and what we have in the SHGs. So I think that's very important, and I think becomes all the more critical for urban areas also. Now, your question was specifically on what we do to address the issues that sir has raised regarding the urban areas. That's a tough one, sir, because we still don't seem to have got it right, and there are very few models that are currently available. And I must say that there is a bias also in terms of our efforts, say in the non-government sector, towards the rural sector. I don't know whether I'm right or not, but there is a bias towards the rural sector. So that is something which we will have to think through much more. I can't think of any immediate solution. But one of them, of course, is our elected bodies are in place. Can we use them as a vehicle of improving things?
Yeah. We talked about the markets being able to touch rural, but obviously markets are more easily able to serve the people in the cities. So, Merrick, if you were to talk about the role of markets in enabling jobs and livelihoods for everyone and improving the quality of life of people in cities, what do you have to say as you look forward?
So, look, I think in the end, the role of effectively markets or capitalism in the bigger sense will be how do you allocate the resources to extract most value? And I know people don't like the word extract in that ways, but effectively to generate the most amount of value. And so, the role of markets is so crucial that it will make the model sustainable. One of the things that we really need to establish is that anything, any intervention, how does it, as you mentioned, sir, scale and how is it sustainable? Because otherwise, whatever efforts we do, we just need to do it at 5x, 10x, 100x level. But 100x of something in India, when you start off with a village or two villages, is still negligible in the scheme of things. So the role of markets at a certain point of time will need to take over. Having said that, there will be some places where obviously markets cannot function, and that is where the role of governance and more on-ground government will be important. But what's that balance will be the most crucial thing. I see more and more the markets, and if I look at the startup lens also, that maybe the early trend was the startups and everything need to serve the cities and e-commerce and things like that. But I think the newer trend of the last few years also has been trying to go for agriculture related innovations, and agri-tech is also growing. Soil health nutrition also, there are startups working on it. So I think the market is realizing the fact that there is an untapped opportunity. And obviously market, when you put that lens on, they will look at a lot of these things as opportunities rather than sort of responsibilities. But that's the reality. I think it is a good idea to engage with them. Sometimes what I see from an outside, having sort of wearing both hats is both do not want to talk to each other. Like the social sector almost looks at market or gaining profit out of things as sort of taboo in a way, and vice versa. Sometimes the markets always feel that what is this use? It will not make sense. But the reality is obviously much more complex than that. I think it's a tango that the social sector has to sort of lay the foundations for some of these things. Eventually, the market solutions will need to take over. I think the final point on this is the digital revolution that has happened, and I think to the point of even collaborative governance, I think the transparency that the digital stack can really bring onto the table and create this governance which is sort of scalable, that is there, whether it's the agri stack that is being built. Again, I would say a lot of these things, I would be the first one to say there are challenges, but that doesn't mean that they are not the right direction. I think a lot of the digital tools are to be used. And in fact, in AI, one thing about China, one thing that they are focusing on, if you notice, is not only the foundational models of AI, they are focusing on AI for governance as a very key strength. So how do you get AI in a right way into the right impact areas is much more crucial for countries like maybe India than maybe the foundational models also. Again, that's a different discussion, but in principle, I think it's a tango that we need to play.
You briefly touched upon startups, and obviously you talk about AI right now. See, historically, a lot of technology-led growth, that markets that have seen technology-led growth, are on the back of the research, innovation, and investments in R&D that's happened in labs, defense systems, university and academia, etc. India has historically neither had the wealth to invest in research and development from private markets and philanthropy or private wealth, and government has also not been able to invest as much in R&D, even though we invested in institutions obviously well. And my favorite example recently is that somebody was telling me that Swiggy, Zomato, many of these companies were earlier using human beings to respond to our queries when a delivery is late, etc., etc. Now they use AI. Earlier, 500 people as labor was getting money in the back office when these queries were being asked. Now, because they are using APIs from AI organizations on their LLMs, their cost has come down materially, but even the money that they are paying, 80% of that is going to companies outside India, right? So the innovation happening outside is obviously reducing the cost here, taking jobs away, but the wealth is not in the country, and it is not helping the economy, not helping the broader systems here. As we go forward, how important it is for us to invest in R&D and innovation, which we haven't done in services. We use the products outside and sold in India, or we created services for these companies. And we haven't invested in our own innovations that the other countries saw during the world wars and post-world wars as well. So Neelam, you have been sort of on different government committees on this. I'd love to hear from you and then Mirik on the role that you think R&D and innovation will play, and governments doing quantum computing, tens of thousands of crores, etc. I love your view on the role of that in growth.
So, Atul, it's a very key point. For us, to develop something is really important. We cannot be dependent on other countries to give us IP, because you're right. We use AI, we are transferring so much of money to the companies which have developed the agents, developed LLMs, and so on. When I look at the startup ecosystem and I look at it from tech lens, most of them are looking at how can AI be implemented or provide solutions in banking, in manufacturing, in telecom. We are not thinking we have to develop an LLM, we have to develop foundation modules. We are not thinking on those lines. We are also thinking LLM consumes too much of GPU power. Can we do small model instead of large language models? Can we do SLM? And that is the thinking we have. We have always been frugal. We never had many resources. So we are thinking of R&D which will be run by people who have less resources. And that's the right thing to do. We are not US, we are not UK, we are not the richest country, we are not China. We have to do innovation which is cost effective. And that is a thinking which is coming up in a big way across the country. The government has been encouraging a lot. We have had quantum computing, but if you didn't know, Department of Science and Technology has now got 1 lakh crore fund which has been allocated, and they have to show what projects they are supporting. They have a milestone of 31st March also to give to companies and to individuals and to startups who are coming up with new technologies or new products or new innovations. And hence, you're seeing a large amount of technology which is coming there. Some time back, there was a think tank which was set up by the government under the Niti Aayog thing. We were all thinking about, if 2047 we have to be a developed country, what are some of the technologies which will give us that flip? And in that, we talked about EVs, we talked about drones, we talked about AI, we talked about quantum, we talked about, there were 6 or 7 technologies which we have identified. Then the white paper was put across through Niti Aayog, and that is how this 1 lakh crore was sanctioned for us to do innovation. But did we talk about innovation in agriculture? The answer is no. Did we talk about innovation at the grassroots level as to the plumber who has come from the village to work in a urban city? Are we going to take care of them? The answer is no. There is a social fabric change which we must discuss here, and that social change is so critical. If you look back 15 years ago, all of us, even 20 years ago, all of us came from college and applied for jobs. We all wanted to go to Google and Microsoft and here and there. And we were very happy if we got a job. There was a time before us where people would be in the job throughout their life. Now, nobody wants a job. You go to the best institutes like IITs and IIMs, or you go to the best colleges, 50% or 60% of the class is not applying for jobs. They want to manage their own, what they want to do, and hence you are seeing, I don't care, I'll do some innovation, I'll take some risk, if it works fine, if it doesn't, I'll do something else. But people are not becoming job takers, and that's changing. Now, when you think about the electrician, the plumber, the local guys, absolutely the urban poor, to give another word to what Amarji talked about, they are exactly the same. The gig economy is exactly the same. I do not want to work for a company. I want to manage my own future. I'll create my own job. I'll do it on my own. And that we have to recognize. Many companies like Urban Company and Mrs. Madam, and then there is Pronto and others, they've recognized it, right? So there are websites where you can get people like this to help you. Perhaps we have to do that to bring all of them into an organized sector than to say, yaar, wo plumber hi hai, he can do whatever, or electrician hi hai. You know, that thinking has to go away. And this social fabric that I own my career, I own what I will earn, I will do what I have to do is bringing about a lot of changes.
So before I come to Mirik, I have a question for Mukmeet you. You have worked with the labor markets a lot, and you're talking about social protection. Now, India has spent enormous amount of money already, and huge amount of capital that state coffers have, central government has, is committed to social protection already, mostly in the form of cash transfers, good or bad. What do we need to make sure that the gig workers in India, which has been the largest growing job creating segment overall, what is the right way that they should feel secure about their retirement benefits, health insurance, access to education for their kids, support systems that they need in urban cities, housing in urban cities is a huge problem for them. What are your thoughts around that as we get into this mode?
Yeah. Before I answer, can I ask you a question?
Please.
Okay. So I'm putting on my labor hat again. I was DG of ESIC, Employee State Insurance Corporation. Can you just take a guess as to what would be the size of the corpus that is there with ESIC? Just take a guess. Conservative, whatever.
I needed a chit before this. But I'll take a wild guess.
Yeah, take a
something around like $1 billion.
No,
Nine,
you're
10.
off. You're off by I think 18x. It's 1.6 lakh crores. That is the amount of money that the ESIC is sitting on. 1.6 lakh. You were right. She's the finance person. Okay, she got it right. She said some lakh crores, which is about $18 billion. And by the way, that's not government money, huh? That is the money of the employers and the employees, and not employees like you and me, employees who get less than 21,000 per month. That's what ESIC is for. So it is the biggest social security scheme in the world. We're not aware of it. Now, there's a phrase I've learned in the last 3 days. What is the problem statement? I'll tell you what the problem statement is. If ESIC is sitting on 1.6 lakh crores, they already have certain benefits in place. You have free medical, disability, accident, maternity, everything is there. Dispensaries, hospitals. Now the problem statement is, what do we do with that 1.6 lakh crores? That's a problem statement I would raise I would do a challenge fund on that actually. And now the issue of gig and platform, I gave the numbers. We have, when we talk about investments coming into India, we talk about the new labor laws. They've been stuck for the last 4 years, and for whatever reasons. But there is one of them, which is the Code on Social Security, which actually is early hanging fruit. That takes into account the fact that the increasing number of our workers are going to be gig and platform. So there is a provision out there. So what I would argue is that even if we don't have consensus in this country on the wider labor laws, at least there is some low-hanging fruit. Can we get a political consensus on that? Can we get a political consensus? And something like the Code on Social Security, we will have the consensus of all our trade unions also. The trade unions have an issue with some of the other codes. So can we get a consensus on that and increase the ambit of the social security, not just for the formal workers, for the informal workers? It's a problem statement. There can be very good solutions. There is very little, when we talked about collaboration between, civil society, philanthropists, my sense is, I don't know whether Amarjit sir will agree with me, that the collaboration is more at the field level, at the state levels. But at the central level, I think we sit in our offices in a little more distinct way, and there is not too much I think we need to have collaboration on policy also. So that's a space where we would like to see. And so we were just talking during lunchtime, the need for having something like that even at the national level. So the possibilities are immense, and over the last 3 days we've also learned that finances in government is not an issue. ESIC is just a small example, which is not government money, right?
It's just mind-boggling, right?
Yeah.
And it is only for the formal sector, which means if 9-10% of India is creating 1 lakh crore of ESIC cumulatively, imagine if the informal sector starts to get benefits.
And mind
like
you,
this
is only employees who earn less than 21,000. So they are the labor which is at the margins. They're the ones who keep coming and going out. There is an MTS who comes to my office to say sweep. It's a contractual labor. He's on ESIC. And I think the biggest challenge we find in something like this is awareness. The person who's coming to the DG's office to work, he knows that, मुझे 18,000 मिल रहा है, मेरा 2-3,000 कट रहा है, मुझे पता है PF से कुछ कट रहा है, वो मुझे मिल जाएगा. But he's not aware of ESIC. He's not aware that he can go to a dispensary in Sarojini Nagar and get himself treated. He can go to a hospital to Basai. So that issue about awareness, outreach, and I think, we are very good in government I'm quoting Mr. Balasubramaniam, who was here. We're very good at products in government, but we're very bad at process. Okay, and that thing is stuck in me because of my ESIC experience. So what is it that we can do? The possibilities are immense.
Amazing. Merik, we'll get to you now and go back to the question we had for you, which is around the role of R&D. And you have spending a huge amount of philanthropy capital in working on translational research centers across the country. Lovely project. Just talk about what do you see the role of R&D in India's development?
No, so I think it is almost impossible to think about sort of a developed economy if we don't really focus on R&D. And I think I would say that, look, there is enough money, right? I was going to ask for that 1.6 lakh crore, by the way, for funding R&D in India. But anyways, jokes aside, I think it's a combination. I think it's not just throwing money for the sake of throwing money. I think R&D is a very complex field, especially in the modern world where it's also very interdisciplinary. So what happens, I think you gave an example of, say, if you want to build an EV, or a strong EV car or a strong battery, it almost takes like 7, 8, 9 different fields. And right now the expectation of the government is, give me the phone as a final product. But you make the phone, you need to really spend money on very obscure things like adhesive manufacturing and XYZ across the value chain. So I think sometimes the approach also is like take a hammer, throw money and it will get solved. I think it's a combination. Money is very, very crucial, but the coordination, especially in a complex field like R&D, it also starts becoming much crucial. And the gap that we are at least seeing is also the industry-academia collaboration in India, which is virtually non-existent. I think everyone can agree. And if we are not able to solve that academia-industry collaboration, that industry also starts spending capital with academia to then take the products which are at a smaller lab level to the final commercialization, then the whole cycle sort of breaks. And that is why the sort of role of the translational part, which is in the middle, which is effectively for the sake of everyone here, it's effectively piloting and prototyping at the end of the day. Where do you pilot? Where do you prototype? I think that becomes such a crucial aspect. So I think R&D is almost, we spend around 0.67% of the GDP in R&D as a country. China is at 2.8. Out of the 0.67%, only 35% or 40% is private. While in China, 70% of the 2.8 is private. And efficacy, I think everyone would agree of private R&D will be better maybe in that sense. So then if you look at that numbers, I think, so even as a percentage of GDP, I'm not talking absolute amount, even as a percentage of GDP, we are quite less, both at the private sector and at the public sector. So I think that becomes quite important. But as ma'am mentioned earlier, if we have the capital, we can do what ISRO did, right? So I think if the combination of capital and organization is met, we can definitely go down the path of frugal innovation and things like that. Even in areas of nuclear, India has the highest amount of thorium reserves in the world. And Homi Bhabha in 1950s had a 3-stage nuclear plan with thorium being the final step. And again, we are not there yet. So it's like, what, 70 odd years. So I think that element of capital plus coordination is very, very crucial. And I think we need to up our spending for sure, but better our spending. I think it's not just about upping it.
I think with the government throwing capital at it and showing real seriousness around investing in R&D, and private philanthropists and academia raising money from their alumni and investing in that, I hope that we have a better future in R&D than the past. We'll take a pause right now. We have the last 10 minutes. I have one round of questions more for everyone. But before I get to that, I'll throw it open for the audience. If you have any questions you want to ask of the people here. Can we have a mic here in the 4th row? Can you please share your name, the question is for, okay, then ask the question.
Hi, good afternoon everyone. I'm Nayanshri, I'm from the Nudge. I have a question for Mukmeet sir. Sir, you talked about the gig economy And even one of the previous sessions, Dr. Shamika Ravi also talked about the gig economy, that it's going to be the future. But, and we are talking about formalizing them, those workers. How can we ensure that the formalization is smooth? Because whenever the formalization happens, more paperwork, more inspections, they have to follow the labor laws. So the transition doesn't become smooth. The employers do not want to absorb in the formal economy those workers. So in the end, the workers are penalized. I agree, we have e-Shram portal, we have Atmanirbhar Bharati Rozgar Yojana, we have all these, but still the transition is not smooth, sir.
Okay. So on a lighter note, if you ask the employers, please sit. If you ask the employers, they hate the ESIC inspectors. They really hate them, for whatever reasons. But when we talk, I'm not talking about formalization in the sense that they get all the benefits that are currently given to a formal worker. So in the case of gig and platform, you have to understand that firstly, it's growing at a very high rate. There is tremendous amount of mobility. More importantly, there is no employer-employee relationship. In the olden days, any labor law will start with this. The first article will be talking about the employer and employee. So you cannot formalize the gig and platform economy in the way that we understand formalization. But I think from where the new code is coming is the fact that we cannot provide them the same level of social security cover that is there for a formal employee. So they remain part of the gig economy, but can we provide them a bare minimum social security cover so that, for instance, they are sick, they cannot get onto their scooters to think. They have an accident, they have some sort of a disability. Basic things, at least start with the basics. Because, we have a corpus of fund, as I said in ESIC, but that is, please remember, it's not of Government of India, it belongs to the workers and to the employers. So the idea is not to formalize it totally, but to come up with a new model where you at least provide the basic social security. And therefore, there is no need to get into that whole system of compliances. It'll just be something like we have CSR, 2% goes to CSR, maybe 1% of the profits of the gig and platform, the platform, so to say, that is passed on to government, and then government provides the basic social security. At least we are starting from base zero to something which is a little better.
Thank you, sir. There's a question here.
Hi, good evening. My name is Komal Khanna, and I'm an ex-USAID employee, which was shut down, I think, a few months back by the Trump administration. So my question to the esteemed panelists who are there, both from the government and from the private sector, is when we talk about collaborative governance, we talk about decentralization, we talk about scale and sustainability, and we're talking about markets that work for the youth of India, and this youth is going to be 1 in 4 people in the global workforce is going to be Indian, right? And that's what the estimates say. So how do we make this youth capable to be able to deliver and to realize their fullest potential without a collaboration between the public and private sector? Because, I mean, from where I come, from the development sector work that I've done, I have worked with the private sector and I have tried to build partnerships with the public sector. And that's what we try to create through alliances. But there's always a mistrust, there's always lack of engagement with the private sector because they work for profit, we don't. But the reality is that you might have 1.6 lakh crore money, but the government is not able to utilize that money. They don't have innovations, they don't know how to scale and sustain beyond a point. They need the private sector, they need the non-government organizations. So how do we bring all of the stakeholders on the same platform to work for the youth, which is the largest youth population in the world? And that's the question that really troubles me, because we're going to be 2047, a developed country. Without the youth, it can't be possible. Thank you.
Amajit, sir.
Thank you very much. You would be hearing me say it repeatedly, the last mile facilitation, collaborative governance and human capital. The reason why I use these is to answer your question. We have to move from distrust to trust. You know, I am a member of a school management committee. I don't know what my role is, and I've been there 5 years. I go for a meeting and I come back. That is not transformation. Did anybody invest in my capacity building to become a member of a school management committee? No. So clearly, when we are talking about the last mile facilitation, we are talking about an engagement which is an engagement of equals. Collaborative governance is, we have collaborative governance with non-state actors who have a role in decision making, who are not simply there 4 days a year. No. So clearly, in terms of the approach, there is, private sector, government, clearly, once the basic human capital is of a certain level, private enterprise is the finest form for growing faster. Goes without saying. 1991 onwards, deregulation, delicensing, we have seen in our own country. Unleash the private sector, allow it to do whatever, move faster. For sure we need that. But we are at a stage currently, and with our, very rightly, it's achievable, the dream that we have for 2047. But what it will require is a movement away from distrust to trust. What it will require is a partnership that looks at every person as a resource. What it will require is for the state to perceive its role in building that human capital and creating conditions for partnership. Lot of the private sector enterprise can take care of many things. But I think it's also important to realize that we don't want to remain a nation. For example, the periodic labor force survey 1920. If I earn 25,000 rupees a month, I fall in the top 10-15% category of wage earners. The jobs that we have are the 18,000, 17,000, 16,000, 15,000, 19,000 per month. Is that a decent wage? No, it is not. How do I create wages of dignity? How do I create more entrepreneurs in the system? All of us have to sit together and think through this. We have the aspiration to be the $13,000 per capita income to be a developed country. We are moving up, but we need to move much faster. And in moving up faster, very rightly, industry has to say that if productivity doesn't go up, how do I pay higher wages? There's the other argument that if human capital doesn't improve, how does my productivity improve? If human health doesn't improve, how will my productivity improve? The real challenge is to go up the ladder. Productivity has to go up, and all of us have to work together there. There is this whole notion that this is government and this is private. We need to move towards a model of community institutions. Not a sarkari institution, but a sarkari one, which is very impactful. Because we need to be impactful in the interventions that we make. Thank you.
We have just a couple of minutes, and I know there are more questions here. We'll have to park it now. I'm hoping the panelists here will be available for some time after this session. You can catch them offline. Let me throw a last question, and I love all of your views. I've been very fascinated when I see many other countries build a citizen's imagination about what the country's population, youth can aspire for. American dream is a very, very popular sort of understanding for Americans, but also people globally saying American dream is to have your own house, have a car, be able to have enough discretionary money to spend the weekends, go on road trips, etc., etc. So all Americans were sold this fancy, and they built like 20, 30, 40 years of American collective imagination on that. If I were to think of Viksit Bharat, and you take like a young 21-year-old, finish, let us say, graduation, what is the Indian dream a young person should be carrying in his or her generation by the time the person is 60, which is 2047, around that time? So I would love all of your views of the Indian dream for an average Indian youth from here on. And I know Mirik's in an enthusiastic
I am saying this is an out of the syllabus question, that is.
But since you have the mic, we'll start with you, Mirik.
I think I would say there are two things. One is sort of the hard reality. I think, frankly, just Delhi in winter not having air pollution. That's the hard reality of the discussion also that we need to acknowledge. If I look at more aspirational aspect, I think thing that you are empowered to do what you want to do at the end of the day. That's like at the core of it. Right now, unfortunately, as people or entrepreneurs, the hurdles that are there in the system to do what you want to do, whether it's the licenses and all of those things, or if you want to the overall ecosystem is not there for an entrepreneur to do what they want, and you are not able to live the kind of life that you are able to live in terms of access to healthcare across the board, I think. So I think just the empower nature is the dream. I won't go down the path of quantifying that in terms of this much housing and this much cars. I think just the empowered nature. But I would also, just on that point of view, we must not, sometimes the focus on 2047 becomes so strong that we do not focus on the fact that 2030 is required. And like, I was just saying, like, frankly, we have to solve the Delhi pollution, right? And others as well, not only Delhi pollution. So one thing is we may become a developed country, but if we are not solving this critical problems, then it might be not worth it as well. Sorry for
to say you are saying empowered citizens or empowered.
Yeah, empowered citizens. Empowered citizens to do what they want to do at the end of the day.
Okay.
Even socially.
Okay. I like the energy on this. Everybody has a mic in their hand. Go ahead, Neela.
No, yeah, so it's a really good question, because I think when you're 21 today, it's a very hard life, because there are no jobs, there's AI coming in, there is so much of transformation happening, and maybe I may not have the right education. But the 21-year-old dream is to have good health for themselves and their parents. They don't want assets. They don't want to buy a land and house and cars. They're not looking at that. They want to do a satisfying job. They want a job which takes care of the needs they have. And I think there is also a focus of work-life balance, which is playing a very critical role in every kid's mind. Because gone are the days where we entered the office at 9 o'clock and at 9 p.m. we are still there and still motivated to work and finish the job. They don't want to do that. That's not a life they appreciate. But they want to do meaningful roles and also have a better life balance when they do. And lastly, they don't want to deal with the complexities of having to deal, sorry to say this, with the government. They don't want compliance, they want enablement. If I have to drive a car, I need a driving license. Enable me to get that driving license. Don't look at it as a compliance all the time, that you haven't complied to this is the law, you have to comply to this. They're not interested in that. We have to enable them to do their job and do well and live a life which has got a balance in it. That's the aspiration.
So you're saying two things, right? One you're saying is meaningful work, and you're saying enabled population to get meaningful work. Great. Okay.
Again, I'm going to, since I was sitting through all the sessions, there was one quotation which I noted, and that said, access to opportunities with dignity. I think the last word is also very important. So as a youngster of, say, 21 years who's reasonably qualified, I mean, my dream would be that if the government of Jharkhand, that's where I worked, puts out an ad for, say, they want 10 peons. My dream would be that for that job, only maybe 500 people applied and not 5 lakh, because I have so many other opportunities. Today the obsession with trying to get into government and the jobs associated with the government, I think that our youth has to move away from that, and that can only happen when you have opportunities with dignity. That's my dream.
Lovely. So access to opportunities with dignity, jobs for all, etc. Amanjit sir, you have the last word.
Something similar, but every Indian citizen having social opportunities to develop their fullest human potential and to live lives of dignity. Now, it's not in the realm of the impossible. It needs the right policies, it needs the right focus, but most of all, it needs collaborative governance and last mile facilitation. We have to create the very basics of the format that we follow. They need a greater thrust. And we have examples of successes. The 100 million women is one example of such a success in the women's self-collectives of self-help groups. I think that is the way to go. We have lessons in minor little successes. We need to amplify that as much as possible. Thanks.
Lovely. I think the common theme that I'm hearing from everyone is how can we make sure that an average Indian has access to opportunities, is capable, skilled enough to access the opportunity, and there is enough for everyone, dignity for everyone. Lovely. With that, I know our time's been up for the last 1 minute, but thank you so much. You've been a lovely audience. And as a last session of Charcha, I also want to thank all of you for investing 2.5 days of your life in being here and sharing these 2 days with us. Thank you so much, panelists, for all your learnings and wisdom that you've shared. Thank you.